What's up? Welcome to Fight City Gym Talk. You are here with Eric Wallin, and I want to ask that question. Do you need a background in other martial arts to be a good MMA fighter? And the answer is no. You don't need a background in other martial arts to be a good MMA fighter. It helps, yes. So for the young kids, if you got a chance to be on your junior high school wrestling team, get on that wrestling team. If you got a chance to do some USA boxing, do some USA boxing. If you got the opportunity to compete in jiu-jitsu tournaments, go compete in jiu-jitsu tournaments. Because yes, it will help. But let's say you're that 22, 23-year-old kid that hasn't really done anything but wants to start MMA. Yes, you can still be a great MMA fighter. But I will say, you got to put in the work. You got to really put it together and compete often. And I always say this, compete in jiu-jitsu, compete in amateur boxing, amateur Muay Thai as often as you can before you go take your first MMA fight. But let's go back to, do you need to be a specialist of another martial art before you start MMA? You got to remember, MMA is just straight up fighting, unlike any other martial art. So with that being said, the combinations between punching, kicking, knees, elbows for professionals, then the takedowns, then the ground and pound, then the submission. It's complete chaos. So a good fighter, and when I say a good fighter, I'm thinking someone that's just good with their hands, great athleticism, can think outside of the box. And that's a huge part of MMA, being able to think outside of the box. I see so many people go down to the ground and all they can think is armbar triangle. They're not thinking outside of the box. Chael Sonnen, when he fought Anderson Silva, was a really fun fight for me because Chael Sonnen was hitting Anderson Silva with all sorts of stuff. He's boxing the ears and slamming him with his shoulder, and these are things that we hadn't really seen in MMA before. And what I'm saying is that ability to just kind of ask yourself two questions: is it illegal? And if it's not, is it going to hurt? So think about that. When you're fighting MMA, those are the two questions you need to ask yourself all the time. Is this thing I'm about to do illegal? And if it's not illegal, is it going to hurt? Now, you should be practicing this stuff in sparring. So in sparring, I hit people in weird places all the time. I'll drive an elbow into a weird muscle group, see if I can find a pressure point or something. And so what I'm doing is I'm constantly experimenting. Like, does it hurt when I put pressure there? Does it hurt when I hit them there? Does it hurt when I bend or stretch this like that? I'm always kind of asking myself, is this going to hurt? And then the other thing is study the MMA rule book so you can know whether or not you're breaking rules. So I'm not going to go through all the MMA rules, but you can't strike them in the groin. You can't fish hook. You can't poke their eyes out. You can't hit them in the back of the head, hit them on the spine. So there's a handful of rules you got to understand. If you're not breaking those rules and it's about to hurt them, you might as well do it. So with that being said, we've got a lot of different things that someone can exploit in fighting that maybe a specialist wouldn't understand or know or have practiced or have seen. And so when I say specialist, let's come to some real common ones. You might fight someone that's a jiu-jitsu specialist, a wrestling specialist, boxing specialist, or Muay Thai specialist. Those are probably the four most common. And you also might get into Taekwondo, karate, stuff like that. So they're going to be, if you ask me, a little bit, it's going to be harder for those guys to think outside the box and hit people with stuff they've never seen before. But if you're not a specialist and you're a fighter, you have to exploit every little opportunity that you can. Because you got to think, your takedown and takedown defense is not going to be as good as a wrestler. Your hands aren't going to be as clean, as fast, or as powerful as a boxer. Your kicks are going to be sloppy compared to a Muay Thai fighter. Your jiu-jitsu submissions are going to be very small as far as like maybe just a few of the basic subs, where a jiu-jitsu specialist will have hundreds of possible go-to subs. So the fact is, if you are a fighter, you have to create chaos and control that chaos. Because what those specialists want to do is they want to create a very uniform game where you play by their rules and you follow their lead. So a Muay Thai fighter is going to want to clinch stand up, push you into the cage, clinch, kick, stand up, push you into the cage, and they want to keep that style of fighting going. If you're not a Muay Thai fighter and you're fighting a Muay Thai guy, you got to get him out of that game plan. If you don't have a background, you can still be a great fighter. You just have to learn how to exploit your opponent in all the possible ways. Now, some of the funnest fights I've seen are between two fighters who don't have a background. Because the fact is, if they don't have a background in anything, you're going to see a lot of crazy stuff. So with that being said, if you don't have a background, yes, you can still be a great fighter, but you have to put in the work and you have to really start to develop these other skills and talents. Because if you don't have a background, it's going to be hard to beat a wrestler or a boxer or a jiu-jitsu guy. So we have to put in the work so that we can catch up to these guys, but then exploit them and create chaos that they've never seen before. So that's just my 2 cents. Is it going to be easy? Absolutely not. Is it a benefit to have a background? Absolutely, yes, it is. But if you don't, that doesn't mean you can't. It just means you have to work harder and be smarter than those with a background in some sort of martial art. Anyway, guys, thank you for joining me. I hope you liked my opinion on the matter. Let me know if you have a background, if you don't have a background, how your background has helped, how you've been able to do if you don't have a background, if you're still winning or losing fights. Let me know. I want to hear from you guys and see how you're doing based off these principles that I've talked about, whether you do or do not have a background and some of the stuff that you've come up against. Anyway, don't forget to like and subscribe. Hopefully you hear from me soon.